Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your relationship without your man's conscious effort so you feel desired and taken care of and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm talking about 3 things wives get wrong about husbands. I'm going to cover how to end misunderstandings and hear his heart message. My guest Judith's 40-year marriage had descended into a distant semi-business arrangement. It was reliable and convenient, but there was no fun, no passion, no joy. Now she says her marriage is full of fun and passion, like when they first met, except better, which is something she'd been trying for years to achieve. She's going to reveal how she finally did it. And then I'll be giving out the worst relationship advice of the week award, which sounds so reasonable, but just makes holes in the bucket of intimacy and connection in your marriage. All that is coming up. But first, let's talk about 3 things wives get wrong about husbands. Imagine if your husband did and said everything you needed to be happy in your marriage, as though he were trying to win the Husband of the Year award. What kinds of things would he do differently? Maybe he would redouble his efforts to clean up and maintain the house, or show up more for the kids, or maybe he'd be more affectionate, seeking your company whenever he got the chance. You'd be more taken care of. You'd feel special. You'd feel desired. Wouldn't that be amazing? Your husband actually does want to do all those things for you. All men want to succeed, especially with their wives. So what's stopping him? It could be, and often is, that he's misunderstood. He's conveying one heart message, but you're hearing something else. Here are 3 things that wives get wrong about their husbands. Number 1, seeing him as lazy. Let's say you walk in after work with groceries and there are dishes in the sink, no sign of dinner being started, and wet laundry that needs to go in the dryer, and your husband is already relaxing on the couch. You might see him as lacking initiative or just plain lazy. You might think he's downright selfish for not seeing what needs to be done and doing it. But is he truly a slacker, or does he simply need to know how to be successful at being your hero? Is he just resting so that when he finds out what you want, he can jump up to do it? True, he didn't look around and see what needed to be done without you having to say something, which would definitely have been great, but that doesn't mean he's unwilling to help. It could be, and often is, that he needs to know how to make you happy in that moment. Now is your chance to express your desires in a way that inspires. That means you need to know what you want. What is it you would love? Is it to relax on the couch yourself? To go out to dinner? Would you love an empty dishwasher? A glass of wine? Maybe all of the above? If you roll your eyes at him or otherwise indicate that you think he's a complete waste of space, you won't get a good response. But if he thinks he truly has a chance to please you, then watch out. You might be amazed to what lengths he'll go when he knows exactly how to make you happy. Number 2, thinking he doesn't want to do things because he's complaining. Maybe he offers to start dinner, but in the same breath, he complains about how he's worked so hard already and is tired because all weekend he was doing yard work and working overtime. Plus, he did all that paperwork for the mortgage or the insurance. Like he's the only person who might be tired. He sounds like a whiny baby. You might think he's just trying to shirk his responsibilities and dump them all on you. Maybe it's easier just to do things yourself than to listen to him complain. But what if his complaints were less about his unwillingness to pitch in and were actually an awkward plea for acknowledgement? In other words, he's listing and relisting the things he did because he wants to know that you saw and appreciated his contributions. Sure, he's going about it the wrong way, no question. You have to have a very generous ear to hear his heart message that he wants to be appreciated. But what if you could clear up this whole misunderstanding by simply saying, "You do so much around here. Thanks for working so hard to support our family and for all that you do around the house too. It makes me so happy." Not only do husbands stop complaining about what they did when you appreciate them, they seem to walk taller and prouder when they know they made their wife happy. Number 3, believing he doesn't want to spend time with you. Sometimes you feel like you're barely getting to talk to each other all week because of crazy carpool and work schedules. And then when you think you're finally going to be able to see him, your husband says he's going to go visit his mom or he's going to help a friend move. You feel like the last person on his list. He has time for everyone and everything else in the world, but no time for you. And it hurts. So you let him know how disappointed you are that he's not spending time with you, which makes it very clear he is not going to win that Husband of the Year award again. That makes him feel like a bad husband, which makes him want to run far, far away to avoid feeling like a failure in your eyes. In other words, he'll be spending even less time with you. Granted, that's not the most mature response, but it is human, and your husband is a mere mortal man. Here's the misunderstanding. Your husband visits his mom and helps his friend move because he's one of the good guys. He's generous. He's hardworking. He likes to feel needed, especially by people who appreciate his company and his help. Instead of expressing disappointment in him for neglecting you, consider sharing how excited you are to finally get some time alone with him. Isn't it true that you're looking forward to couple time? Imagine if he knew how happy you're going to be when he comes home. Don't you think he would get home a little sooner? Of course he would. A man loves being around a wife who can hear his heart message. If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. My guest Judith's 4 decades-long marriage had descended into a distant semi-business arrangement. It was reliable and convenient, but it was devoid of fun and passion and joy. But now she says her marriage is full of fun and passion, like when they first met, except better, which is something she had been trying for years to achieve. She's going to reveal how she finally did it. Judith, thank you for being on the Empowered Wife podcast today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Laura. I'm honored to be here.
Well, take us back to the bad old days of your marriage. What was it like?
The bad old days were pretty much as you described them in the introduction. I had a wonderful man and we had a solid marriage and we'd produced 4 children, and together as a unit we could click in and, we were quite proud of what we'd achieved. And if it was a family event, we would show up as the perfect husband, wife to our children, our grown-up children, to the world. But then when we got home, it was silence and, I don't know, maybe sadness. It was just, and then if it wasn't that, there was bickering, and it was over silly things that I thought, this is crazy. We've got so much, and yet every time I see you, we seem to bicker. So, for example, I might say, I think we need a new gate here. We live on a farm. We live on 200 acres. And he would come out with 10 reasons why we didn't need a new gate, even though I could barely open that gate and I was struggling to open it. I had no idea then how to express a desire. And so that was it. And then I'd try and think, just go into some topic that's really neutral. I'd say, do you think it might rain today? No, it won't. Weather forecasters said it won't rain today. It was like, okay, no win. It was like checkmate. Everything I said got shot down in 1 flame or 10 flames. And I was desperate. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very tiring, exhausting.
It was exhausting. And I remember waking up day after day after a while thinking, is this all there is? I've looked forward to this period of time when the children have gone, there's a bit more money, we can do all these things. And we just seem to have moved into a bickering phase. And I could stop it getting ugly. I could stop it going up into a fight, a real fight, a screaming fight. But sometimes I actually wished we'd do that and clear the air. But I could never stop I don't know, I used to call it snappy Tom, but I now call it bickering. It just went backwards and forwards.
How did you stop it from getting into a big fight?
I guess for me, I had a background in this, so I'd worked in this area and I had a master's degree in this area, which is pretty funny, isn't it? So I could tell you the stages of conflict in any language in the country a couple of years ago. And so I knew when we were moving up, it was only going to keep on escalating. So my background said, just walk away, let things calm down, and then, change the subject. So that's what I did, but nothing got resolved. I felt like I couldn't really speak from my heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Say a little more about what you do, because I think this is fascinating, because you were going to work every day and trying to help others resolve conflict. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So my background was in law, and I had a master's in conflict resolution from one of the top universities in my country. And I used to sit across from people at the desk who were, of course, trying to work out which weekend they could have their children, who got the dog, how much money, who got the car, the whole shebang. And I used to look at these people and think, how did you go from being so in love and with these beautiful children to being here, with all these words? And so I had been on a little sojourn of my own, researching everywhere. And while I knew how to get people talking and negotiating and keeping it flat enough to get them through, I couldn't stop them. And that was my quest. And so I guess at the time I found Laura's work, I'd been on the internet looking for a fresh voice, somebody that didn't just say iMessages or communication is everything. And am I allowed? Can I go on?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And everywhere I went, that's what I got, the soft startup, the hard startup, you name it, I got it in it from every psychologist. And then I saw this random thing about Laura's books, and it was like nothing I had ever gone near before, straight down the line, academic. And I just thought, let's just have a look here. Let's just have a look. And I had a look, and then I read, and then I downloaded the ebook, and I just went, I'm sorry, this girl's a genius. She has worked out somehow how to prevent all this stuff happening. And I just couldn't wait. It makes me teary thinking about it. Couldn't wait to start using all the skills, which I did. Yeah.
You've been waiting a long time to feel empowered. And it sounds like that's what you got from, you got some hope that had gone missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the first thing you started doing differently than you had been doing things?
Yeah, the first thing that I was brave enough to do, and this is, I was the good wife, right? I did everything for everybody. My children were facilitated through all the best schools, all the best universities, you name it, they had it. My husband was facilitated through all his businesses, and he has 2 or 3 of them. And I thought that was the right thing to do. And self-care was a bit of a revelation for me. But the basis of self-care, which for me was keeping yourself happy, was the real game changer. I no longer left my happiness in my husband's hands, or anyone else's hands for that matter. I started to walk, and I was actually not even telling him that. I was waiting for him to go to work, and then I'd do my walk because I felt guilty that he had to work all day. And he's always been the most amazing provider, and I've never wanted for anything. And so I felt guilty getting my walks in. But they started to make such a difference to my mental state, which by that stage I think could be classified as mildly depressed. And then I started adding other little things to it, and I made my list, and I conscientiously did 3 every day, and my happiness levels just started to rise. And so, I thought, you know what, if absolutely nothing else in this skill set works, I have been given a gift for life, and I've never stopped being grateful for that. I can honestly say, since I started the skills, I've very rarely had a flat or a dull day. And that is priceless, in my opinion, for me. And so I look back now, and I think every day I can look back and go, it doesn't matter whether, the world fell over and all these other things fell over, I could still be happy. And what a gift. So anything else on top of that was a bonus to me.
I have chills hearing that. I love that. You've had not one dull day since you got, and at first you were sneaking around. You were doing this self-care on the sly, hoping not to be discovered. Does your husband now know that you?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And I can remember a big day when I was having my coaching with Coach Stephanie. And he'd come home from work and changed his clothes and went out to do something on the farm. And I'd been on my own for 10 hours. And pre-skills, I would have whinged or thrown him a bad look or done something. And I thought, I'm just going to strap my walking shoes on. And I said to him, this is a 2-walk day. And off I went. And I was so happy I did it. Came back on cloud 9. I'd started running by then. I now run 10K a day. So my cardiovascular system thanks you as well.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah. So that was a red letter day. And then I thought I just added to it. I regularly schedule in girls' weekends, going away, the things that really add quality to my life. Yeah. I love the trivia. I love the massages and the facials and those things when I can get them. But there's kind of like the icing on the cake too. So yeah, it was an absolute game changer for me.
And you got some validation from your husband that you
I did.
had done this.
Laura. A son who's actually studying in America, and he'd rung home, and I'd said hello to him and passed the phone over to my husband because he wanted to talk to him. And I heard my husband say, yeah, I don't know. She's just so happy these days. I don't know what it is, but I'm not saying anything, sort of thing. And so I quietly walked out of the room then because I thought, I'm not supposed to be eavesdropping on his phone call, but that's part of my controlling behaviour. I used to have to know what was being said all the time. So I left the room. And, so it was huge.
So the jig was up. He knows that you're happier now. Mm-hmm. How has it impacted your marriage?
I just can't tell you how it's impacted my marriage. So much in so many ways. First of all, he still works full time. So whenever he goes out the door there, instead of a perfunctory, business-like kiss, because that's what we did, he now gives me a hug and a cuddle with a real kiss, and then when he comes home, even if I feel like having a whinge, I don't. And I have the capacity because of that self-care not to do that. And so I greet him like the goddess of fun and light. I welcome him and he smiles and we talk, and he doesn't put his shoes on anymore and walk straight out the door. He shares his day with me. So, yeah, it's been profound.
I think you really just described something I think we all, secretly or otherwise hope for, which is that connection, that it's an authentic connection, right? That it's not just a rote greeting and parting through the day, but that you can feel there's an intimacy that you're describing that sounds really wonderful. And so if you were talking to a woman who had been in your situation where it did feel very distant and businesslike, and she's wanting to create this kind of connection that you have now, what would be your tip for her?
My tip for her would, first of all, be read the book. Secondly, get some coaching. My skill tip for her would be do some self-care. Make yourself happy. It is the cornerstone of being able to be the person you want to be and show up the way you want to show up. And somehow it reaches back into the person you were when you first met him. And that was a very happy, extroverted woman. We met when I was in my mid-20s? Mid-20s, yeah. So you can't go past self-care and keep working until you get the thing that really, really rocks your boat, Really just don't follow anyone else's things about what they do for self-care. If facials aren't for you, don't do them. Find something that just makes your soul sing and everything falls into place.
I love that. And you've been studying to be a coach. You're in process of becoming a coach right now. Yeah. And how has that impacted your relationship?
Oh, wow. Coach training has been amazing. Absolutely amazing. Even if you never wanted to coach, I would encourage anyone to do the training. It has supported me and being in that community of women who are all on that same journey is just such a special experience. How has it impacted on my marriage? In so many ways. I respect my husband. I didn't ever think I'd say that. I used to think I did because he was a really beautiful professional. I didn't know what respect meant in a man's world. So no matter what sort of thinking he comes up with, it gets a whatever you think from me. Whereas before I would have burred up and went, oh no, come on, that's crazy. I've relinquished control over so many things. I stay on my own paper and I receive. So I was a bad receiver. I could tell you a story about farm tools I'll get. I got. Would you like to hear that one?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So
I need to hear about farm tools.
I realised that when I did the receiving module, that my husband used to buy me things all the time, and then they weren't quite right. And so I used to say, oh, okay, thank you. And then they would get put in a corner, or he would know. Somehow he would know they hadn't hit the mark. And he'd slowly stopped giving me things. And then when one day he came up and he said, I'm off to Farm Fest, which is a big farm thing around here. And he said, I thought I could get you a battery-operated chainsaw. I'm thinking, okay, because, that's what every woman needs.
It's everyone's dream.
Everyone's dream.
Battery-operated chainsaw. What woman doesn't want that? Okay.
We already had a chainsaw. Now, this is very typical of my argument with him. I said, oh, we've already got one. We don't really need another one. But what I'd forgotten, of course, was I'd injured my shoulder about 3 months ago and I couldn't lift anything much for about a year. I had to just not do anything. And he knew I loved to trim things in the garden. So I said, no, thank you. And I knocked back this offer of this battery-operated chainsaw. And I thought for 24 hours and I thought, you can't receive. So the next day I just casually said, you know what? I think that would be just amazing. I can't lift anything. I really can't use that old chainsaw. I just think that would be amazing to have that. So the next day after that, he toddled off. And when he came home, it was like a kid unloading a toy box. I not only got a battery-operated chainsaw, I got a battery-operated leaf blower, I got a battery-operated bush trimmer, and another one. They kept coming out of the car and the whole floor was covered in all these things. And I just couldn't stop thanking him enough. So there, and since then he hasn't stopped. He's booked tickets at restaurants. He's booked tickets for theatres that he knew at people that I would love. He booked me into a special restaurant down in Sydney for my birthday, which COVID put paid to, but whatever. Couldn't get on a plane. Yeah. So it has not stopped.
So beautiful. So you really are that rare woman who does dream of a battery-operated chainsaw. That was not really off the mark for you. It was something that you could appreciate.
Yeah, I could really appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, so I love that part. Now, let me ask you this too. So here you used to have all this bickering, and now you've gotten this training and you are more respectful. But you're a very well-educated professional yourself, right? So you're very smart. And do you ever feel, oppressed or less than because you don't just come out and contradict what he's just said?
I've thought about this a lot. I mean, I was a, fire-burning feminist, led a walkout in my mid-20s for women's rights. The answer is no. I feel so empowered. I love seeing him so happy. I love being so happy. I get absolutely everything I want and more. That book, it will get as good as it takes. What's the title, Laura?
As good as
you can stand.
As good as you can stand.
I know. Yep. Sometimes I don't have to do anything. He just does everything for me. And he wants to do all that for me. And I think, well, why would I deny somebody that? And I'm the recipient of it. So no, I don't. I have much more of my own life and my own happiness than I ever had before, with old skills and old academic skills. So, yeah, no, I do not feel, I feel empowered, truly empowered.
You sound it. So what if you could go back in time? I just always love to hear, what would you say to Judith from before that you know now?
I would say it isn't that hard. Relax. You really can be happy and you really can have the relationship of your dreams. And, for people in my era or vicinity, nearing retirement, you really want those next golden years. If you get them, you want them to be golden, you know? And so I would say relax. You can have the golden years. You will be happy all through those years.
I love, because here you've been married for such a long time, way longer than most people, I'm sure, statistically, if we look, right? 40 years is just an incredible accomplishment. And you had this determination in you to keep seeking. Like it wasn't enough to continue on with status quo. So you just had this remarkable determination. I mean, where did you get that willingness to try something different after all this time?
We'll possibly laugh at this, but it was looking, and we all do it, we look at our friends' relationships. And I had friends who, I don't want to say they're good friends, but I guess some of them were going off to counselling, some of them weren't talking, there just didn't seem to be any connection. I didn't want a relationship like that. And I've run into other people, and some of them are quite honest about it. They just say, oh, we've got a business relationship. We can't afford to divorce. We share the same roof. We go to family functions, and that's it. We live our own lives, and we're happy like that. And I just thought that was sad. I didn't want to be like that. And I could just see the slow slide down into that sort of tarnished, taking each other for granted. Yeah, and I didn't want that. And so, and I definitely had tried all the iMessages. I knew all that stuff backwards, and they didn't work. Nothing worked.
You had a brief encounter with counseling, I think, too. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a brief encounter with counseling when a colleague of my husband's decided that my husband was going to be her next husband. And it lasted a year. And we had 4 children at that time, the youngest being about 2.5 or 3. And she sort of moved in and almost became the third person, I used to joke, in the marriage. And I didn't know what else to do. So I'd exhausted my friends. They get sick of that sort of thing pretty quickly. It's like just put up or shut up sort of thing. They get sick of hearing about it. So I thought I'll toddle off to a counsellor. I made all these arrangements because we live in a provincial town, and I had 4 people picking up 4 different kids, and I drove all this way, and I went to this counsellor who was recommended as one of the best. And it turns out the counsellor, when I told my story, he just kind of laughed and said, oh, I think I know who you're talking about. And I thought, what do you mean? How would you know that? Anyway, he actually knew the woman involved and said, don't worry about it. It's just a boundary issue. She doesn't have boundaries. And I thought, just a boundary issue. My whole life is falling into a great big cavern. I am consumed with anxiety, sleepless nights, losing weight. And you're saying it's just a boundary issue. So I paid him his money and thanked him and left.
So it sounds like you felt entirely dismissed and not seen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Not seen, not heard. Yeah. Trivial.
Solve the problem. Yes. And it's interesting because here you are talking about these very personal matters in a very public way, and you have some status in your community. You're a prominent person. What has you be willing to discuss these private matters?
Yeah, it's a really good question. When I first started, I was very shy about it. And I knew that from my study that from my training, I knew that when people were in conflict, they denied. So they practiced denial, and I think that's where I was. And once I started coaching and I got my volunteer clients, I really had to be willing to share me because that was the truth. That was the truth. And denial went out the window. And I have been to all those places, and I have struggled. And I am where I am today, and I'm proud of my journey.
Yes. Well, I'm inspired hearing your journey. It's wonderful and inspiring. And I just love knowing that however long you've been married, because you're way ahead of me, you've been married a lot longer than I have, that it's not too late to get your happy ever after, your golden years, as you're saying.
Yeah. No.
You can do it. You can do it.
You can so do it. Yeah. And we have our little insider jokes now. Everything. Our physical intimacy is picked up, our emotional intimacy. We share everything. If occasionally I do fall off the rails, and I'm controlling, if I get a bit scared, I move into control. I've learned that about my pattern. And as soon as I try to control, I get hit with a brick wall from him. And that's my mirror. That's my spouse mirror. And I think, okay, is there something that I've said or done that's created this? And if I have, I apologize for it and move on. And if I haven't, I don't. It's just I leave him alone and he'll work his way through it. So yeah, it's been amazing, and it continues to get better. And and he's just happier. We're all just happier.
Well, congratulations on your success and your amazing commitment and courage to do this work and be so vulnerable. I just love it.
Well, you know how much I love your work. I can't wait to get through and coach and just spread the word and just let people know that they can turn it around, and that they have the power, and they don't need him. They don't need anyone. Yeah. They need their book and a bit of willingness. And I would so support them having a coach, because a coach is an amazing experience to have somebody that you can tell everything to, and that it won't go any further. They've got your back. They're there to support you. They will gently make you accountable, and they're so skilled, and they've been there before. So, thank you. And Stephanie and Kathy, of course, the most amazing team ever. And I sometimes can't believe that these three women achieve so much.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much, Judith.
Pleasure.
If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. And now it's time for the worst relationship advice of the week award.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And the advice that's got me riled up this week is to talk openly about everything, even the stuff that hurts. And the translation is, be sure to complain, which is no way to get happier or create intimacy. If that worked, I wouldn't have ended up so hopeless about my marriage, and you and I wouldn't even be talking right now. Talking about the stuff that hurts is also not something I would do in any of my other relationships, like with a friend or a sister. That just doesn't make any sense. Can you imagine your friend saying to you, I got to tell you something, and it's gonna hurt? Neither can I. Here's how this lousy advice tripped me up and how I've seen it trip up lots of my students. When I wasn't happy in my marriage, I was also confused about whose job it was to make me happy. I thought it was my husband's fault that I was miserable, but it turns out no. I was doing that to myself. So when I tried to talk to him about the stuff that hurt, what I was actually doing was criticizing him and complaining. So in addition to being miserable, which was already hard on my husband, I now wanted him to fix the unfixable. The underlying message was, you're not doing a good job making me happy. And that was hurtful to him to hear, because it turns out that is one of his major goals in life. Just like the thousands of men I've polled about this, I've asked thousands of men, I say, how important is it to you that your wife is happy? And they all say the same thing. They say it's everything. It's the most important thing. It's imperative. And when he didn't respond very well to my complaining and criticizing, my husband, that is, because who would respond well to that? That upset me even more, because I interpret it as him not caring about me being happy. So then I was even more miserable. What I didn't realize then was that my husband would have to break the laws of the universe to somehow force me to be happy, because I was more than a little attached to my misery. I mean, I didn't like it, but I was used to it, so I clung to it. Even when he tried to do sweet things for me, I turned him down because he didn't do them the right way, or they were a waste of money, or that wasn't what I wanted. Plus, receiving made me feel too vulnerable. Those were my problems, but I didn't know that. I just knew I was in a lot of pain, and I figured it was his fault because I didn't even know how to figure out what I wanted, just what I didn't want, which, by the way, is the definition of complaining. I just had no idea. So there were lots of things to talk about that hurt, but unbeknownst to me, very little of it had to do with my husband. And until I could tell the difference between my paper and his paper and learn to stay on my paper, I was just creating a lot of needless emotional turmoil and fights by blaming him. So one of the biggest gifts of practicing the 6 intimacy skills and the connection framework is being able to tell the difference between my paper and his. That reduces the stuff that hurts by around 99%. The overwhelming culture of my marriage now is that we both feel safe and relaxed, which means we can be playful and have fun, which we do. We have rubber band fights and we do silly stuff like race to pick up the mail, and we splash each other at the sink, and we jump up to dance every time a certain song comes on from our playlist. And even the 1% of the time when I'm hurt because of something he said or did, now I tend to think, that's a fluke or a misunderstanding, not something serious I have to talk about with him, or else I'm able to shrug it off because there's so much evidence that this man loves me and he does so much to make me happy. Clearly, he did not intend to hurt me. It turns out there's not much hurtful stuff to talk about now that I know how to stay on my paper. And yes, that feels like a superpower compared to how I used to feel so victimized in my marriage. It all started with figuring out what I wanted instead of what I didn't want, and expressing that instead of a complaint or talking about the stuff that hurts. For that reason, the advice to talk openly about everything, even the stuff that hurts, is the very worst relationship advice I've heard all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, we'll talk about 4 things about marriage counseling that will blow your mind. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is this first world problem. The most stressful 5 minutes of my life is driving to the beach and worrying that someone else took my volleyball court.